Welcome back to A Bit of Curiosity. I'm your host, Jeremy Howlett, and I am here with the other three founders of Altra. I'm excited to have us all together. We were talking just beforehand. It's probably been well over a dozen years since the four of us have been in the same room together, even virtually. So it's fun to get together, talk about the early days of Altra. This podcast is really all around why we started it, what the stories were, and yeah, we'll dive in. So I want to get us started off with just the question of why. Like, why Altra? Why did we do it? Why did we start it? Why were we all committed to it? Bri, you want to tackle it first?
I think that really it goes back a long time. I think Golden can probably frame it up even better than I can. It's just for us, it's about running technique and healthy and natural alignment and just trying to get your body to interact with the footwear as natural as possible, right? I don't know, we used to use terms as kind of inspired by barefoot on stand, like we'd watch people run barefoot on grass and they'd run with such great biomechanics, and we put them on traditional shoes at the time and their biomechanics were terrible and they were hammering down. So I think, simply put, it's just allowing you to be aligned and run more naturally.
Golden, you want to elaborate? I think we lost Golden's audio there. He's
Yeah,
on
I have
mute.
no sound coming from Golden.
You're muted, Golden. So we apologize for that.
Check. Here we go.
Okay.
Here we go. All right. Sorry. I was saying the first thing that came to my mind when you asked that question, I went back to Hawaii for me originally and my experiences there. And then I went to, it had probably been 9 months since I zeroed the first pair of shoes, Jeremy, when you were over at my house on my birthday and we went for that run. And I think that was like kind of an encapsulating why moment, right? And, happy to have your side of this story, of course. But if I remember correctly, you came over to my house, we were talking, I told you how I'd been, modifying shoes for foot health and running technique reasons. And you hadn't run for several years because your knees had been a big problem. And after I told you what I was doing, you were like, well, let's go for a run. And I said, okay, you wanted to try the shoes basically. And all we had were these hacked up modified prototypes, where were done, just by ourselves, right? Like nothing professional at all. And, I had a Saucony, shoe that had been modified at the time. And we went for this run and we just ran 3 miles. We ran out to Dry Canyon and back on the Bond Mills Shoreline Trail, from the trailhead right above my house. And you wore the modified zero drop big toe box shoes on the way out. And you couldn't believe what happened. Tell me your experience if you remember.
Yeah, well, to kind of set the stage, right? Like this was 2009, July, and I had two goals at the time in my personal life. One was to lose 29 pounds by my 29th birthday, and the other was to, at some point, start a business. I wanted to become an entrepreneur. And so I happened to be down in the Orem area in Utah, and it was Golden's birthday, so I figured, well, twofold, I'll go wish him happy birthday, and second, I need a new pair of running shoes, because in my pursuit to lose weight, I started running, and again, it'd been years, like Golden said, and when I did, I was dealing with kind of just aching knee pain and some issues there, and even trying running on trail, and that experience, and so, well, it must be the shoes, right? That's weight probably was an issue a little bit, but also footwear. Let's get some new shoes, and that's when Golden introduced me to this hacked up, modified, zeroed out shoe that he had, and as we took that run, he let me run in that pair on the way out, so about 1.5 miles, and it felt good. No knee issues. He was watching me running from behind, analyzing my form a little bit, and then as we got to the halfway mark, he kind of commented on some of the things, and then he made me switch in shoes. And I didn't want to.
And I had regular shoes on.
Yeah, he had a regular 2-to-1 elevated heel, right? Like 12 millimeter drop, typically, like, and made me switch shoes. And I was pretty reluctant to that. And he forced it on me. So we switched shoes and we ran back. And again, my knee pain was almost automatic. And you can kind of talk to the visualization of form there, Golden, but my form fell apart as we ran back. Not that I was perfect form running out, but it was way better just because it was more natural stride, not having that elevated heel. And so for me, there was a big why, like, and Joe hosts a podcast called Daily Cup of Joe, and I was on it a few weeks ago, and he asked, Joe, you asked me, like, how intention played into the founding of Altra. And I honestly don't remember the answer I gave on the podcast, right? But I've thought a lot about it since. And I think there's intentionality for each of us, and I think we can all kind of go to that. First, I'd like to hear Joe's why, but my intentionality was, like, I feel like Altra was founded somewhat unintentionally based on other intentions. My intentions were run healthier, run without knee pain, right? To lose weight. And then I had the intention to start a business at some point. So after that run with Golden, he was kind of explaining the biomechanics, all of this stuff. And I said, okay, well, where can I get a pair of shoes like that? And the answer essentially was they don't exist, right? Like, they're not out there. And I'd laughed at him. I was like, yeah, right. Like, there's got to be shoes out there like this, right? It's like, and essentially it came down to, well, I could buy a pair of 5 fingers but not have the cushion and protection, or I could go hack up an existing pair of cushioned running shoes, right? So he talked me into buying a new pair of running shoes from the running store and then taking them down to a cobbler.
You really soft sold that. Jeremy was flabbergasted.
I was shocked.
He refused to believe me that there were no shoes that were level from heel to toe, the cushioning, and that were shaped like healthy human feet. He refused to believe, like, he didn't believe it. And I was like, well, what do I know? I just manage a running store.
Well,
so Jeremy's like, well, I'll go find them because they surely exist.
I believed you by the end of our conversation, and then it was like, okay, let's go start a shoe company. Like, let's go do it. Because you can't do it at scale if you're just going to modify shoes out of the running store, right? Like, you can hit the Utah County market, but that's not scale, right? Let's go to scale and let's start a shoe company. And
I said, I've been thinking about that for a long time, but starting a shoe company is the quickest way to go homeless. Because we've had the same 7 big running shoe companies since the beginning of running shoe time, basically.
Yeah, Golden, you and I had that conversation literally 2 weeks earlier on a backpack.
Yeah,
like
it's
there's
crazy.
only seven of them that are there, and like starting a shoe company, and it was more of like, how do we convince the other brands to do it rather than us starting it?
It's crazy talk.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I took the crazy talk and I found a way. So
yes, you did.
Jeremy always found a way. That's how it was.
But it comes down to that core why, right? Like, and then Joe, you got involved a few months later, right? Like, kind of go over why. Why did you were the money guy, right? Like, you were at the core of it, right? The 3 of us, Golden, Brian, and myself. Yeah, okay, we had a dream, we had a vision, but that vision doesn't come to reality unless we can pay for the stuff that we needed to pay for. And somehow we convinced you to go all in. So tell us why.
Well, a big part of this, the team. I knew Golden, although we weren't like close friends at the time. I'd been going to his store for I don't know how long, and buying all my shoes from the store. And I trusted them. And I want to say that was about the time when maybe Caden was running with your sister, Golden, I think. Or at least they knew each other at school. So I knew your family was just this incredible running family. And I had a lot of faith naturally just in your family. And then Brian, I've told this story before. Brian was my son, Caden's a scoutmaster. And I saw Brian come running out of the hills. I mean, we're talking like a 10, whatever that elevation is, Brian, like 10,000 feet
Yep.
or
Yep. In the
11,000 feet.
UNS.
That's scout camp at Uintas. And I'm like, what the hell? What is this? How is he coming out? And like, cause I had done Ironmans and whatnot before, but nothing in the mountains. That was one of my first times. I'm like, I got to do this. I don't know what he was just doing, but I got to do this. And he came out, he had just finished a training run of 20 miles or something like that. And I was like, this is amazing. I was sitting around a campfire and I said, you start a business, I want to be part of it. And maybe I was being a little tongue in cheek at the time, Brian, but not really. And then this comes together and I'm like, okay, Golden, he's golden. This guy's like been doing this a long time. Jeremy, you were new to the team, but your passion was, to me at least, your passion was so strong and so excited. That entrepreneurial drive was so much passion in you, Jeremy. And then of course, Brian and Golden. And it was just, and then you guys started teaching me about running technique. And I realized that my running I was constantly being injured. I was that guy that you guys talk about. I was the perfect candidate because I always had shin splints or IT band problems or plantar or whatever it is. Like it was just constantly had these issues. And I just thought that's normal. This is normal for runners. And you guys start telling me, I'm like, and Golden, I think you took me for a run and you're like, oh, you're running, you're not running right. You were pretty blunt about it. I'm like, yeah, probably. And so it took me a while, but as I changed my running style, I realized I became so passionate about this. Your passion, the three of you just kind of rubbed off and it started to affect me personally. And as I heard that story of foot shape's a big deal. I don't think it's talked enough about, enough, frankly, because when you showed me my foot, you showed it with my own foot, guys. Like when I put my foot down without a sock on and a shoe, it just did this. The toes spread out. I'm like, what? Why are we cramming toes into shoes? What's going on? This is why the blisters. This is why this. And then, of course, the zero drop. And I changed my running. And it just, the passion. I'm telling you, passion will find a way always. And you guys had so much passion. That passion passed on to me. And I wanted to be a part of something greater than myself. The idea of being part of a brand, I could see where it was going. And you guys talked about, this is going to be another Saucony. This is going to be another Adidas. And I saw it. I believed it. And look what's happened. It's a worldwide brand, guys. It's crazy.
And you stepped us, you kept us from walking off a cliff like 50 times along the way. So thanks for that.
Yeah, that's true. You weren't just like the money guy. You were definitely like the mentor.
The mentor guy, yeah.
The adult
Absolutely.
in the room.
The adult in the room. That's exactly what it was.
It was an honor. It was so much fun. And I still to today, like Golden, you and I went for a run yesterday together.
Yeah.
And those trails were introduced to me by you guys because I wasn't a trail runner. I run Johnson's Bowl. You guys introduced me to Johnson's Bowl. I run along that pipe run that Brian, you and I did last year together. And that originally I did it with you guys. And I think of right at the mouth of Provo Canyon. Like, I don't even like to run on roads anymore, truthfully. I mean, I will run on roads because that happens, but I don't even like it. And that came from your guys' passion, and I thank you for that. I was running yesterday with Golden, and I was just thinking of this, and I didn't know we were going to be on this podcast at the time, so it's very timely. These a lot of emotions and thoughts, and it was really kind of a cool feeling to go through that, guys, truthfully. And to then be on this podcast with three of you it's an honor, first of all. And it's a really great feeling to go through that again and realize that something great has really come out of this. So thanks for your passion. Thanks for your enthusiasm. Thanks for your experience. And thanks for including me. I proudly wear my Altra brand everywhere. I wear them all the time. That's all I run with. And I'm honored.
Well, Joe, we're honored. We appreciate you. You took a risk on 320-something that had a crazy, harebrained idea to go take on the Big Seven, right? And because of you, we were able to do it, right? Like, we were able to bring it to fruition and make some things happen. I love one of the things that you pointed out there that I think is profound is you wanted to be part of something bigger than yourself. And I think your whole career has shown that with everything that you've done, everything you've gotten involved in. But Altra, like, yeah, what we built is something way bigger than ourselves. And I think sometimes we wish that other things reflected how big it is, but it's been phenomenal to watch as Altra has continued to grow, continue to just be something different. And then another thing you pointed out was the foot shape, right? Like, it does not get the love that it needs to. One of the things that we used to do very early on, as we would show people, we'd have them take their running shoes and we'd have them take the insole out of their current running shoes, put the insole on the floor, and then step on the insole. And it's a really interesting visual. If you're at home and you're wondering, like, how healthy are your shoes, go grab the insole, pull it out, step on it barefoot, and see if your feet stay inside the parameters of the insole. In a lot of cases, they don't. They bleed over the insole, right? Like, and that means your shoe's constricting your foot, right? And there's a lot of health benefits by having a foot-shaped shoe, and there's an immense amount of value. And I think that's one of the things that Zero Drop is what got us into the market. It's what got us started. It's what really kind of really differentiated us from a storytelling standpoint and some of the things that we hung on. It's also the thing that has drastically changed the entire market. We've seen the entire running shoe market go from 12 millimeters as standard to now 8 millimeters as standard. And that's because of us, right? Like, that's because of Altra. We did that, right? Like, that's phenomenal.
And so many of the most popular shoes on the market are 4 mil, 5 mil or less, including, most of Eliud Kipchoge's world record performances were in 4 millimeter drop shoes.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I didn't know that.
And this is something Nike doesn't talk about, but that's the reality of the situation.
Malcolm Gladwell has a book called Blink, and I don't know if you guys have read that. If you haven't, man, it is a must. And you guys made an entire industry blink. I mean, that's kind of a cool feeling.
Yeah.
Well, and
also, Golden, I didn't know that, Golden, about what you just said. Like, just think about it.
I feel like we could apply, like, all of Malcolm Gladwell's books to our story, right?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
David and Goliath, Outliers,
right? Goliath,
yeah. I know. It's like every one of them.
Another thing that's awesome about this is, we talk about changing the industry and, Jeremy, you having your, fixing your knees, and Joe fixing your mechanics. And ultimately, that's what's crazy that a lot of people don't realize is the word Altra. We got it from a word Altera, which is a Latin-based word, which means to change or to fix. And I feel like that's exactly what we did. We accomplished what we set out to do, which is to change an industry and to fix runners, right? That was our purpose, right from the start, right? And the way we were doing that was helping people through foot shape and zero drop, right? Aligning people naturally and helping people run with better mechanics. And I think that's what's really cool is, maybe not everything happened that we wanted or visualized with Altra, but the key components of why we started Altra happened. And we made a huge impact. And I think, I know I'm proud of it. And I think all three of you are very proud of that. And we should be. We changed an industry. We fixed a lot of runners out there.
And you probably hear that, guys, all the time. Like, I hear it. And I'm kind of like the fifth Beatle. I kind of stay in the background. I don't say anything. But when I hear people say it, I'm like so proud. I'm like, that's so cool. Where they say, I can run again. Or I mentioned this, I think, just recently. I think you were talking, Jeremy, you and I were talking on the podcast, but I have neighbors who are doctors who use and that's all they use it for. Like, how many people, they may not even be runners, but it helps them to be more healthy in general,
Yeah, for sure.
And they won't use anything else. That should be a pretty good sign about, I don't hear that kind of passion about other running shoes. I just don't.
Well, and it's because that's not why other running shoes were developed. Like, we are literally, as far as we're the only brand that the why was Altera. to mend or fix that which is broken. And that which is broken were broken runners. We have an injury rate that is higher in a non-contact sport than most contact sports because we don't teach people how to do it right. And we strap a piece of equipment on their feet, frankly, that makes it harder for them to do it right. That's something that people have never realized is, in this sport, for decades, we put on a pair of running shoes that literally makes it harder to have good mechanics. And that deforms your foot out of its natural position, and that over time gives you foot pain and foot problems. So that's the big why. I mean, I think we've got there full circle, Jeremy, from your question. Like, that is the why, was to fix broken runners. And really, it kind of became about fixing a broken industry too, because what people don't realize is that first year at Runner's Corner, when I first started hacking up and modifying shoes, we were taking surveys with everybody who would get a pair of these, and they would come into the shop and they'd get a modified pair. They'd take a pair, or we'd take a pair and modify them for them with the shoemaker down the street, and then we would pay them a store credit to come back and tell us what happened. And we had this full page survey with like 30 questions on it. Did this hurt more? Did this hurt less? Where did you have more pressure? Where did you get more sore? What happened to your running technique, etc. And we gathered all this data, and we had, it's the other thing people don't realize. We sold 1,000 pair of modified zero drop shoes, close somewhere around 1,000 pair in that first year out of Runner's Corner there.
2009.
That was the thing that impressed me. That was one of the things that impressed me the most, right? Was that there was a market. We saw at least a little bit of a market demand, right? And so, like, when you and I were talking that first time, like, I think at that point you'd done a couple hundred, and I don't know if you were doing surveys yet. I think we kind of put that together later.
No, we were doing them.
Okay.
Yeah.
But regardless, the feedback and the interest and the demand was there, at least to a degree, right? Like, at a local running store, there was some proof, right? Like, proof of concept was there. And so it was like, okay, well, if you guys have done a few hundred of these, like, let's keep doing that and see where that goes. But let's go start a shoot. Like, let's go make this, right? Like,
and it was to the point, Jeremy, it was to the point where I knew when we went on that run, there was a good chance that what happened was what was going to happen. Like, I was fairly confident by putting the shoes on and talking to you, your technique would improve, your knee would hurt less. And then when we took the shoes off and had you go back to your old running style, that your knee would hurt again. Like, right. It was that I had that experience with hundreds of people over the past year at that point in time. And so I was fairly confident that that's exactly what was going to happen. And I wanted to get back to the why, and I just lost the connection.
While you're thinking about that, let me just point
please.
something out. Which is, this is perfect entrepreneurship. Yes, of course. Like, naturally, you guys started a company, and it's gone on to become this worldwide brand. But that's really what entrepreneurship is. It's seeing something that other people don't see. And Jeremy, like, I think of that. You're very all four of us are very entrepreneurial minded, but you guys saw something that wasn't out there.
Yep.
And not even the big boys could see that. And by seeing something that nobody else could see, you made an entire industry blink. I think that's a beautiful thought. So anyone who's watching this right now and you wonder, what is entrepreneurship? Maybe you have a desire to be an entrepreneur. That's in a nutshell right there. Seeing something that other people can't see, and then taking action on it and building something from it. And that's when, we take for granted when we drive down the road every day of whatever your main street is in your town, you see all these brands everywhere. That's what happened. Someone saw something that other people couldn't see, and maybe make a better mousetrap or whatever. In this case, it started with something that nobody was doing at all. Nobody.
Yeah.
And
right,
so,
that was,
hats off to you guys.
You made me remember. Thank you.
Okay.
So I was getting back to, we had the surveys, and we literally, my dad and I, and, Brian, we all had great connections within the running shoe industry.
Yeah.
And we started taking these surveys and this data to the other running shoe companies. The whole idea was like, hey, you should build this. Here's the data. When you make the shoe shaped like healthy human feet and you get rid of the heel elevation in the shoe, all these injuries go away, and here's the data to prove it. And, to a T, every single one of these brands basically told us to piss off. Some of them really nicely, I particularly remember one saying, yeah, you guys are probably right. And where you are now will be in 20, 25 years. But can't do that right now. And others just literally told us to piss off.
Yeah.
Well, you're messing with what they do. You're telling them you're doing something wrong. Sorry, Brian, go ahead.
No, you're totally fine. I mean, I vividly remember sitting at Outdoor Retailer in Salt Lake City with Golden in the New Balance booth with like our sales rep had gotten us a meeting with like their like head of product and like a designer, and there was a big group, and we sat there and literally gave them Altra on a silver platter.
Yeah.
And I will never forget the
They
feeling.
weren't the only ones.
I've used it probably more than it's so poignant experience where the head of product looks over at the sales rep and says, "Why are you wasting my time?" And Gold and I were literally sitting right there, like in front of us. Like it was so infuriating. And, that was kind of this eye-opening thing that's like, they don't see it. They don't, and that you could put it on a silver platter and they would not see it. They refused to see it.
And for
And
me,
we did, and we knew we were right. We knew it.
yeah. And the thing
you
for
proved
me,
that, and you proved that passion through what you created.
Absolutely.
So
and not only did they not see it,
Go ahead, Golden.
they didn't care.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the thing for me is I was like, all these people are hurting less. These injuries are going away. And all you have to do is make it and they didn't care. They didn't care because that's not what they're about. Running shoe companies were never built to fix injuries. Running or prevent injuries. That's never what any of them are about. You go read the founding story of any other running shoe company, and it was always about speed. It was always about fast. It was never about caring whether people got hurt or not, which is ironic because you can't run fast when you're hurt. And most runners are hurt all the time. So for me, that was the whole broken industry thing, where it was like, we went and pitched this and, like you said, served it up on a silver platter to all these shoe companies, and they didn't give a crap. They didn't care that people were getting injured. They didn't care that people have all these chronic foot conditions caused by the features of their shoes, specifically tapered toe box, elevated heel, and then the need for arch support because of those things. And for me, that was just like, this is so messed up. Like, how can I, as someone who manages a running store, keep doing this? Like, I have to sit here and sell shoes to people all day, every day, when I know every single supplier, every single company that I'm selling at my shop really doesn't give a crap about my customers based on their actions when we wouldn't put data in front of their faces. The irony, Brian, is New Balance went and built the Minimus right after that.
That's true. That basically we gave them the New Balance Minimus idea.
Yeah,
that was, yeah.
I mean, they didn't do it all the way.
Boys.
They still
Made
tapered
the
the toe
industry
box a
blink.
little bit, but it was wider. They didn't go to 0 drop, but they went to 4. They still built some stupid arch in there because they had some heel elevation and the big toe bent in a little bit, but still, that was a great shoe, for the time from a major running shoe company. Because,
it was.
Maybe we weren't wasting their time. Maybe that was just a play. Okay, they gave us the playbook. Let's pretend they're wasting our time.
I think their initial reaction was real.
Yeah,
right?
but then they
went
about it.
back and started noodling it and started thinking it, and I think they saw it from a bit more of a minimal standpoint than we did based on what we pitched them. But I joke about that with people occasionally when we get to deep dive into like Ultra lore. Is like, the New Balance Minimus, we literally gave that to them. Or the other one that we gave was the Hoka Speed Goat, because we were going to sign in the early days. We were going to sign Carl Meltzer.
Yep.
And we had the whole contract done. Like it was like a 17-page, 2% commission, on every single pair we sell. We're going to build you your shoe.
Lawyers
you
are
want."
involved.
The Olympus was going to be called the Speed Goat.
Yeah.
And then he
Oh
took
my
the
God.
contract and went to Hoka and said, if you don't do what I want with the shoe and build a shoe called the Speed Goat, I'm going to Altra. I mean, so it's like the New Balance Minimus,
And they
the
were
Hoka
like,
Speed Goat. We're
okay.
literally like part of our creation, which is pretty cool, right? That we didn't just build Altra, we literally influenced and changed an entire industry, which I think is really fun, really cool.
No,
Made them blink.
absolutely.
Made them blink.
Absolutely. Bri, talk about the fire, right? Like sitting in that meeting with New Balance, right? And other conversations, like how much fire did that light under you?
A lot. I mean, I think, like Golden mentioned, it was like, why don't you care? You know, and I think it made me care even more, right? It made me realize that like there was this I don't know, this inner, you call it a fire, call it destiny. I don't know what you want to call it, but it was like, I felt that we were just drawn to do it. Like we were meant to do this. Like it was like, became like a life purpose, a life mission that this is what we have to do. It wasn't you know, and it wasn't even work. You know, Jared, we've talked about this, you and I, where it was almost like this like group flow where ideas just were bounced off between all of us. And like, I don't even know, I remember coming up with ideas and everyone coming up with ideas and brainstorming. We'd sit in Golden's basement for hours. You know, we'd go up on the ski lift. Remember, we were on the ski lift up at Snow Basin a bunch that winter, you know, skiing. And then we'd end up at my house and Xana would make us a bunch of food and we'd sit on my couches brainstorming for 12 hours. You know, and it didn't seem like 12 hours. Like it just was fun. It was exciting, you know, and that fire just grew and built and it just carried us for, you know, all the way. And it's so exciting. So I didn't document it or appreciate it enough at the time, but I look back on it so fondly with the three of us. And then when we'd bring Joe into those conversations, I look back on it so fondly.
I'm just glad the way life works, you tend to remember the good parts and the bad parts you forget more. Because it must
don't
have
remember
been
the
brutal.
bad parts though. Like I remember it being exciting and
It was super exciting, but that's a little I don't know what to call it. A little revisionist history. It was rough, man. Like it was brutal.
Oh no, it was so much. Like it was brutal. Yeah, it was stressful. You know, it's like having a baby, right? Like obviously those sleepless nights were so brutal and so tough. But man, I missed so much holding my little baby at night, even though the crying, you know, like you really recognize what's important and what's not important when you look back on those moments. That yes, it was stressful. Yes, it was hard. I mean, we were so broke. We were just like, it was weird though, because like I don't really feel like we were necessarily desperate until the very end. You know, I thought those first 18 months,
I'll let you speak for yourself on that one.
Yeah,
Brian,
but it got desperate. Yeah, it did get desperate. That last 6 months was pretty desperate. But I don't
some
know,
of us didn't have mom and dad's basement to go live in for
that
for a while,
first year was pretty exciting. I thought really
Yeah,
exciting.
And you know, it must be worth it to you guys to listen to these stories. Again, going back to the fact that people's lives change because of it. Like you don't hear that from other brands. You hear it from Altra, where people just can't stop talking about how much it's affected their lives, you know?
No, absolutely. No, if you
Makes it all
go
worth
comment on anybody with wearing a pair of Ultras, right? Like nice shoes, right? Like a lot of people tend to have a story behind it, right? And they're passionate about it. I think, like as we look at that 2 years, it was essentially 2 years from the time that Golden and I said, let's go do this, to the time that we launched. And in some respects, right? Like it was a short 2 years. It was, I think from a business standpoint, it might be weird to say this, but it was easy, right? Like it was and Brian, you kind of alluded to that, right? Like during that 2 years, it was easy in a sense that things just kind of fell into place and we were able to make things happen and we brought it to fruition, right? And we launched with one phenomenal product in the original Instinct and Intuition, right? And then shortly thereafter, the Lone Peak came like it set us on fire in the trail world, right? But it was easy in a sense, right? But there were moments of what I would call patient persistence, right? Like there were times where we were waiting between, okay, we sent this off to China and now let's wait till we get our fit sample. And what are we trying to do in the meantime? And what does that look like? Right. Like, but I think like, I don't know that there was ever moments that we wanted to give up, but like what, and maybe there were, right? Like, were there?
Yeah, there were.
I don't
Why?
remember any. It was like we were
I don't know,
called to
wanted
do
to
it.
give
Like
up,
we
but
were meant to do it.
I agree with that. But there were probably 50 times we were on the brink of extinction, and it was like if we can't fix this in the next day or two, this whole thing's over. Like, called to it destiny or not, like we can't go forward. Like we're toast, you know. So yeah,
But we found a way.
We found a way. Yeah.
Well, and that's that
And
And I
patient
think
persistence,
that was,
right?
there
always
was a
find a
no
way.
quit though attitude. Like it was, we're gonna find a way no matter what. We are gonna make it happen. Like it, I don't know about like manifestation necessarily, but we almost like kind of did that. Like it was just
Willed it.
going to happen.
Yeah.
know?
Well, and the three of us are what other people might call stubborn, and that's underselling it a bit.
Well, there was this point of entering into a point of no return, right? Like we went all in. I remember walking away from any other pursuits that I had at the time. I left a job as a financial advisor. I left a marketing agency that I was starting up. Like I walked away from those things. Brian walked away from managing an outdoor shop, right? Like at some point Golden said, okay, I can't work full time in mom and dad's store anymore, right? Like there was this point of like, okay, we're going all in, even though we don't know when we're going to be able to start taking a salary. This was before acquisition happened, right? Like before, like,
It
and
was a year before
and, yeah,
acquisition.
Yeah.
and
That was tough.
yeah, no, it's
Brian's
like-
remembering now. He's like, "Oh yeah, that did really suck."
no, I
Forgot
like
about that.
from a
Yeah,
personal,
well,
from a
I mean,
personal
it did
standpoint,
you were there.
it was hard, right? Like
it was
I-
worth it.
from a personal standpoint, it was hard, right? Like
Yeah.
I had 3 kids at the time. Brian, you had 1,
Just one, yeah.
and I like, yeah, we put a lot of stress to our wives, like, right? Like there was a lot of hardship, right? Like, and starting any company is difficult, right? Like we weren't Mark Zuckerberg on scholarship at Harvard building something in our dorm room without taking much risk, right? Like we took a lot of risk, and there were definite hard moments about it. But again, it goes back to that patient persistence, right? Like we persevered through it, we pushed, we kept on the trajectory. We knew the mountain we were climbing, and we pushed to the top of that mountain. There were a lot of setbacks, there were a lot of hard times, right? But I think we had a lot of moments where things fell into place enough that they were like, okay, we know that this is going to work. We know that we're going to go, right? Like that point of that first drive up to Portland, right? Like I think a lot about that. And when we walked in and pitched the proof of concept crew on what we were doing, they were all over it. They were super interested, right? Like we were plotting out like investment strategy, how we were going to raise money, how we were going to grow it, what we were going to do. We were looking at numbers. We were planning all of that stuff with them. And all the meanwhile, they were printing out our first Last on a 3D printer. Vlad was building our first fit design out of his garage, right? Like all of these things were happening during this 3-4 day trip up to Portland. And as those things started to fall together, it was like, okay, like this is real. Like these guys got connections with factories. Like they're going to help us design out all this stuff. And it was real. And we drove home like, okay, we're really doing this. Like this, and this is September. I know because it was over my anniversary. This was September of 2009. Like we knew at that point, like this is going to happen. Here we go. And yeah, it was, and then Bri, talk like April. Let's talk about April of 2011. Like, what was that like?
Launching the shoe company, it was so exciting. I mean, obviously, I think we were all pretty stressed, and it had been a tough 2 years, but it was awesome at the same time, right? And I think that getting to that finish line, I look at it really. All 4 of us have run ultra marathons, right? I kind of feel like there was a bit of an ultra where it's like, you think you're going to die and you still have to run like another 20 miles, right? And yet we did it, right? And I think launching it was a finish line, and it felt so amazing, and also exciting, I mean, I remember driving down to California and we were at a warehouse that had never shipped shoes before. And like, we had to put up gates and like block out, like, how do we actually ship shoes at a warehouse? Like, we didn't even know that. And then, Jared, you and I packing up this green Subaru and driving to Boston with a little booth and shoes packed in every single corner of the Subaru as we visited interested accounts across the country and launched the brand for the first time at Boston Marathon. And by the time we launched it at Boston Marathon, we were sold out, right, Golden? I mean, by the time, like, we were there, like, we sold out of the men's product in 3 weeks. And then it was like, we don't have shoes until July. I mean, April was really a soft launch. I almost think July was the full launch of the brand. And Joe, you kind of putting that sacrifice and that check on the table saying, hey, if you guys get orders for the product, I'll put front up the money for that first order. I remember being so grateful that you would do that for us. And us going and begging orders at the running event in November of 2010 and Outdoor Retailer in January 2011, going to accounts literally as a Ponzi scheme, like, please write an order for this shoe because our investor won't place an order unless you write an order, and I've got a list of the 34 accounts that we opened with in April of 2011. A lot of them, unfortunately, aren't in business anymore.
How many of those are still in business?
Yeah, there's less than 10. Yeah,
wow.
It's not a lot, actually, because, a lot of them
their judgment sucked.
Yeah, Luke's Walker went out of business, and some of those early adopters, unfortunately. But it was incredible. It was powerful. And I remember, Jared, you and I going to some accounts that did not treat us nice. They kind of like New Balance. They laughed at us, and we just were determined, absolutely determined, in our belief system that we knew what we were doing was the right thing to do for us. And it carried us through a lot of even late night watching car accidents and trying to find hotels in Indiana at midnight. And oh man, it was crazy.
Oh man, Priceline, name your own price.
Oh.
I'll
never
$40, see what you could get, roll the dice.
I'll never visit Michigan City as long as I live.
Oh, I'll never go back there.
There were so many moments that were like hard, right? Like, we got a lot of rejection, but there was a lot of positive moments that gave us the hope for that, to be able to endure that rejection. I remember,
it's actually shocking how much rejection there still is.
Yep. It's true.
Yeah. I remember, I think it was late spring, because I remember running through snow. So it had to have been late spring of 2010, when the owner of Playmakers came out to Utah. Kurt came out to Utah to visit with us, right?
Yep.
And some of the things that he said and just his admiration for what we were building was like, okay, like, we can do this, right? Like, there's another one, right? Like, he's been managing and running store in Michigan for a long time. Like, okay, like, I believe we can do this, right? And it was those moments like that. And then we show up at the running event, and he was passing out catalogs more than we were. Like,
well, it's because they cost us money. We were like, we can't just hand these to anybody. This is pure gold. The street value of these things.
But I think, like, that first running event was fantastic, and we took some risks, right? Like, again, Joe, right? Like, hey, Joe, we need 15 grand or whatever it is for this event, and he was like, well, are you sure? Is this the right, like, spend? Is this good? Like, are we going to get orders? Like, what does that look like? And we got bought into the whole package, right? Like, we were like, okay, here, we'll stay at this hotel, we'll right next to the convention center. But the biggest value of that was the shoe bar. And like, with that package, it included us to throw like 60 pair of shoes or whatever into their shoe try-on bar. And so we were there, and store owners were able to grab a pair and go take them for a run. And I remember once, Bri, you can probably tell this story a little better, but the founder of Hoka checked out a pair of Altras and was outrun.
Yeah.
But those were the only 60 pair of Altras in existence in the world at the moment.
And they actually said Altera on them, but
it did. Yeah, the logo said Altera.
You know,
So-
Free lawsuit.
speaking of this, yeah, exactly. Which we'll have to tell that in a second. But I used to say, like, I would not want to be in front of the three of you guys and not buy, like having an mindset that I'm not going to buy, because the passion was so strong, and that you just couldn't walk away from you three without a compelling reason. You're either just super anti, or you're going to buy, because it's just so passionate. It's just cool. It's just cool. It's cool to hear these stories, because what a moment when a person would hear this story for the first time. It's so compelling. It's just so compelling. And you guys are so passionate. That's part of the magic of it. How many shoe companies were started by people who were passionate about running?
Makes a
You know?
difference. Makes a difference. Yeah,
So
it's,
You guys,
I mentioned a few of mine, but what points or what event took place that made you sit back and say, okay, like Altra is legitimately going to be something?
I mean, I talk about this all the time, right? And it
And
really
we all know
is.
what Ryan's going to say.
Yeah, it is.
And
It's
then he
my
might
moment.
cry.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I might even cry. It happens. Okay, guys, it's okay. And it really is. It was, we needed more money, and so I went, mortgaged my dad's house, pulled out $70,000, and without even questioning it, and we got our cell samples, and then of course running Wasatch 100. It was a really, truly an incredible, poignant moment in my life, and I look back on it just going like, I couldn't even describe it. I mean, Golden was with me, and I don't even think he knew what the emotions were in my body and brain. My mile 97 Wasatch 100 moment, where I'm sitting there with a shoe I just mortgaged my dad's house for, running in this shoe, no blisters, hours and hours and hours off my previous finish time, just going like, we are going to be huge. Like it was an incredible moment. So that was my moment, where it went from a hope, it went from a belief to a knowledge, right? There was this really, interesting moment there where that occurred, that it will stick with me for the rest of my life.
Brian, the part of that story that we never talk about, or that I never talk about, is that was a bit of a moment for me as well. Because you were emotional, and you were having this moment, and you had such horrible blister problems, horrible issues with your feet across the board in ultras, in hundreds especially, and especially and we're there bearing down on the finish line, and we're moving, man.
We're moving.
We're moving pretty good. And if I remember right, like the sun is just coming up.
Yep.
And you're having this moment, and I'm like, and I designed that shoe on his foot, like that was my brainchild. Like I came, we all put it together, but like the Lone Peak was my passion project, from start to finish. And to think, I just had this moment of like, wow, like, this is really working. And I knew it would, because of the experiences at Runner's Corner, but it was a little different, because it wasn't a like hacked up ghetto prototype. It was a real prototype. It said Altera on it. It had our logo on it. It was real. It was legit, and it was working, And so, I think, we all remember like how the moment is for ourselves, So while you were having a moment, I was having a moment too.
We were having a moment, and it's And Jared, you were involved too. Whatever happened to that footage? We got to find that video recording of the Wasatch 100 footage. I don't have it, so we got to find it, because I know Jared was running with me earlier in the race behind me with the video camera for a big section. We had some footage, but I think
actual
that was
video camera.
Yeah. I think that was the moment, and the other moment, and we don't talk about a lot of the other people that were involved. I think that the four of us, were the key holder, the real key stakeholders in the founding of Ultra. But another moment was at the running event in November of 2010, where we showed it for the first time, that we were a real brand.
Absolutely.
And I remember sharing a bed with Devin Spann, and obviously remember like Heath Thurston and Jacob Hansen, and like all of these people that I don't, might not have been involved in all aspects of those first 2 years.
More
but
lawsuits.
those, yeah, yeah. But like Devin Span, having Devin there, because Devin's such a fun, awesome hype guy, and having the three of us and then Devin Span at the running event, and we were a real brand with catalogs and samples and a booth. Like that was another one of those kind of the check marks, I don't know about a finish line, but an aid station to the finish line, where it was just like, we're making progress, we're doing this, and that confidence that we gained as we were able to do that was powerful. And Jerry, we talked about the shoe bar and watching the Hoka founder try on one of the Altras too, and I mean those moments, those nuggets are just special. Obviously for me, Wasatch and Golden and Jerry, I think all of us, that Wasatch race was kind of this solidification of this product work. Getting to the running event, obviously, Boston Marathon is special because that was where we launched the brand publicly for the first time. So as we kind of hit those checklists, those marks, those key indicators, it's pretty amazing looking back on it.
Well, there were a lot of times that we had to beg or pitch reps, right, and try to get them to take our stuff, and we got a lot of no's from them. But there were a lot of reps that were begging to let them take our product, right? Like, and I like, we look at some of the early adopters in running stores, right, and how passionate were they as employees, right? Like, we ended up hiring one in Seth Wool, actually two of them, right? Brian Roberts and Seth Wold, right? Like, and then even later we hired several more. But those early ones, right, that were just like, oh, this is the coolest thing, right? Like, I want to be a part of this in any way that I can, right? Like, and just to watch the passion of other people. The one thing that I wasn't experiencing myself, but my wife, I remember her calling me while we were in Boston. The Salt Lake City Marathon was the same weekend. And she's like, I was sitting in the expo, and all I had was some pamphlets because we didn't have any shoes for her to sell or take to the expo. But she was able to get in there and pass out some pamphlets, right? These two guys walked in wearing Instinct. And I was like, I don't even have a pair myself. Like, what is this? Like, and they were just so passionate, and they were loving it, and they were talking all about it. And that was Matt Williams and Craig Lloyd, right? Like, who eventually became our Ultra Maniacs. We dressed them up in costumes and made videos with them. And you could probably still find some of those on YouTube.
They're funny.
But they were extremely passionate about the brand, right? And it was playing into that. And then I remember that summer of 2011 being at the finish line of Ragnar, and Matt came up with his parents after the race, and he was like, yeah, here's the shoes I've been raving about. This is what I'm talking. And his parents are like, we're not runners. Like, we just want to get out and walk a little bit more. Like, we're old and whatever. And so I sold them each a pair of Instinct, him an Instinct, and her an Intuition, right? And then I remember Matt texting me months later, and he's like, hey, like, my parents just signed up for next year's Ragnar. Like, they went from walking to then jogging. And they're like, we can do this. And that was because of Altra. And I was like, that's like, okay, like, we are totally going to crush it, right? Like, that's awesome. And we just leaned into that. Like, how many people can we get off the couch and get back into running that haven't been runners, right? Like, and what does that look? And that became such a great avenue for us. And it became a powerful story. And it was phenomenal. It was great what we did there. So.
Well, and as much as we had those moments of confirmation, there was no doubt. Like, Brian and I talk about this all the time. We were running up at Sundance before the shoes ever launched. I had run a bunch of numbers, and I was like, we're going to be like bigger than, like, Pearl Izumi was like killing it at the time, And I was like, we're going to be bigger than Pearl Izumi. And this is all we have to do. It's peanuts, frankly. Like, it's not that big of a deal. We're going to crush that, and we were looking at it and we're like, we're going to be way bigger than that. Like, at that moment, I was like, we're going to be Saucony someday.
Yeah. I remember you're like, we can beat Pearl Izumi. I was like, dude, we can beat Saucony. And guys, we're going to take over Saucony in the next year or two at Run Specialty right now. That's what's crazy.
That's awesome.
It'll be crazy.
Like, that's the size that we're at.
Yeah, it's fascinating. But and the answer to this, you all do. People ask me all the time, like, because they're the reporters astounded with Altra's success, and they're like, would you ever believe that you were going to be this big? And I always had the same answer, and you know what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. I would say, no, I thought we'd be bigger. Like, I'm shocked we're still this small. Like,
Yeah.
I did not foresee the headwinds we would face when it came to inventory, supply, like retail support, like financial crap, customs. Like, our holdups were not product and marketing. Like, those were not the reasons we were not selling shoes. Our holdups were logistical for the
We
most
did
part.
have a couple product issues early on.
We did
Like,
have a few, but that was later. That was a little bit. That was like later.
So
But remember how
But again, that's almost logistical too. Is like we just couldn't keep it in, or like there was an issue because of the accelerated timeline. So
remember how like it was like I think it was like 1 year anniversary of our parent company that bought Joe out. It was like 1 year into that. They had like got the three of us together, and they're like,
so you're
they're
talking
like,
March 17th, 2012.
pretty much like
Yeah.
give or take, right? And we went in front of like the CEO and all them, and they were like, what do you need for it to be huge? And we literally showed up with this whole presentation, and it was all blocking and tackling. We need inventory. We need better customer service. And they were like, no, what's the next idea?
What's your
We're like,
next
they
"We don't
wanted
need
they
that."
they wanted the fancy tech shoe, which we tried to build, and then it flopped.
Yeah.
They
Then we spent
wanted
5 years on a smart shoe, right? That flopped. But like we needed blocking and tackling. I think that was some of the weaknesses. When people ask me like, well, what would you have done differently? What would you have done better? And so often I say, and I ended up having to spend a lot of time on that, but I didn't do it early enough. And that was operations, finances, inventory. That blocking and tackling aspect of entrepreneurship, I think, is consistently overlooked. I don't think that companies don't go out of business because of bad ideas as much as they do about bad operations. And I wish we would have done more. And you guys know I doubled down on that pretty quick,
here's the
for
thing,
better
though.
or worse. But we needed that more earlier.
No,
we expected Icon to take care of that for us, and
I know.
I don't play this game very much. I say it all the time. I don't like to look back and play the what if game. It's not healthy, and it's not But if we had just listened to Joe and done it grassroots the way he said, like I mean, honestly, all that I think we thought having Icon take everything over was going to make all that stuff easier.
We did, yeah, absolutely.
And I don't think it did. I think it actually made it harder.
Yeah, I think
because they were not set up, as Colleen Logan, our other mentor side on the PR marketing side, always said, like, Icon makes refrigerators and Altra is milk. Like, you buy a fridge once every decade and you don't have to send them to that many places. You buy milk every single week and you have to send it out all over creation every single week. And we were so different from what Icon was currently doing. They just weren't set up to handle us, which is eventually why, we ended up doing an acquisition deal away from them as well.
I think
all I'm saying here is Joe was right. Like, it probably would have been easier to grassroots it.
For young entrepreneurs,
and we would all be rich right now instead of not rich.
That's probably true too. But when young entrepreneurs ask, when I look back, hey, what would you have done differently? That's my response.
Blocking and tackling.
It really is about, hey, you have a great idea. And great ideas, there's a lot of great ideas. But how do you make a great idea come to fruition?
Execution.
And those are two different things, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that I wish we probably should have focused more on. And I advise other entrepreneurs when they ask me regularly that, hey, you have a great idea. Good. Believe it, buy in, passionate. But you got to get the funding and the ops and the shipping and the customer service. And that work sucks. That is not fun work. It is not. The fun work's brainstorming and product and colors and design. Like, that's all fun. But the work that has to get done if you want to scale a business is that nitty gritty finance, ops, cash flow, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Don't overlook that as young entrepreneurs. Don't overlook it. Get your head down there. Take care of that stuff. Grind it out. It sucks. Got to do it though.
Yeah. I do want to come right back to that and say I am profoundly grateful to many people at Icon that did many of these things, even if it wasn't the way we wanted to or as fast or well as we wanted to. But but took these things on. I mean, the Dave McAvoys
Yeah.
of the world that
The Colette
really
Lewis's.
stuck their neck out for us and did a lot of this work that we're talking about.
Yep. Agreed.
I think a lot of hearts in the right place that helped us to succeed there as well.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple key points off of all of that, right? Like Brian talks about, operations is key, right? Like everybody has an idea. Ideas fall off of trees really readily, right? But then it's taking the vision of that idea, sticking with that vision, and then it's learning to execute and manage the operations, do the hard stuff with those. And then the second one is pairing up with great partners. I think as we look at the four of us, right, like we fed off of each other really well. We grew really well together. But lining up those other key partners was a bit challenging at times. And that becomes a major, that can become a major roadblock, or it can become a major avenue to growth, right? It can become either way. Altra is what Altra is because of all of that, right? But looking at key partnerships becomes really valuable, and understanding who you're getting into business with fully and looking at that. I'm grateful that Altra is where it is today, right? Like, could it be bigger? Possibly. Could it be smaller? Sure. Are there things that maybe we regret from the past? Yeah, there's things that we definitely, as we've already talked about, could have done differently, right? But at the end of the day, we changed an industry. We've had a global impact, right? We all were part of building something that we truly believe in, and that is bigger than ourselves. And it's been a powerful thing to see. It's been a powerful thing to accomplish. And it's a great blessing. I think we could keep going for another hour. I know some of us have some things that we need to get to today, so we're gonna close it there with any other last thoughts if you guys want to throw in any last chimes. But thanks for joining us, so we can go around. Each of you can kind of give a last word. No talking now.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm just
we're
waiting for
done.
one of you guys.
No,
I
that's
will
good.
say this: it's been an honor to work with you guys, and I've learned a lot from you. And I love this story. I love this story of Ultra. It's beautiful. You didn't even dive into all these other issues. You mentioned Altera, for example, and how we had to change the name. That's just part of the process. That's part of the journey of an entrepreneurial journey. And you learn a lot along the way.
Journey.
And like you said, Golden, you can't look back and say, what if, what if, what if? It is. And we are here today seeing this brand all around the world, and it's a beautiful thing. And it's been an honor to work with you guys, and I learned a lot from you. So thank you.
Go ahead, Bray.
Yeah, I mean, I'd just echo how grateful I am to work with all with all of you. We are very different, and there were times where we butted heads, and I think that so much of that is healthy. A lot of people want us to believe that, like, hey, you believe this, I'm only going to work with people that believe that. You got to work with different personalities, and I think that our different skill sets are one of our keys to success. And that might even cause friction, right, at times. And that's
we're three very hard personalities.
Yeah, it's not like we're like these like super like mellow, chill guys. Like, we're pretty intense. Like, Joe keeps using the word passionate. That's the nice way of saying it.
Joe's pretty mellow and chill, but
compared to us,
yeah, Joe's an adult. We're kids. Come on, guys. We've been over this. But
we're three matchsticks.
How much, even those hardships and all that, I really do love each and every one of you. I'm really grateful that we were able to do this journey together and build something special. And even though, there's a lot of things I look back on that were difficult or hard, ultimately, when I look back on, I smile. I do. It was so wonderful. I focus on that because we learned so much. And so super
100%.
glad we were able to do this together. Jeremy, thanks for bringing us together again here doing the podcast. And again, really grateful. We love each and every one of you.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, I echo all that. I want to come back to one. You guys will remember this. I believe this is 2012. Newton did like this massive push around the Boston Marathon time, and they had all this marketing money, and they had a similar message to ours when it came to running technique. They didn't have the foot health side of things. And I remember we were so frustrated, like, oh, if we just had the resources and the money those guys have. And here we are. It didn't take long, actually, before that house of cards came down. They overspent. and they basically put themselves out of business. I mean, Newton's still sort of around as a direct-to-consumer company, makes some pretty decent product, but they're not a global brand. And you know, we just kept at it. We just kept grinding. I mean, at the end of the day, like that's what it was. We were grinders. Like there was no give up, and we really believed in what we're doing, and we were able to convince other people we were working with to really believe what we were doing. And I think that's the one thing that I hope lives on, and it's the hardest thing for a brand to keep as it ages is its core, you know. And we didn't really get into like the foot health side of the story here today. But in my opinion, zero drop doesn't work without foot shape. Like those two things, wearing a zero drop shoe where your big toe is bent in is not a great thing to be doing. A foot shaped shoe with heel elevation in it doesn't work as well. You're deforming the foot out of its natural position. Like these things together, this combination of keeping your foot in its natural position, not taking your body out of homeostasis, is this magical thing that makes all this work, right? And everything that comes with it, you know, that gives you the foot health side of the story. Like, you know, people don't realize virtually all chronic foot conditions, from bunions to neuromas to metatarsalgia to plantar fasciosis, what we used to call plantar fasciitis, etc., they come from shoes. Like you look at the billion people on the planet that don't wear modern shoes, these things don't exist. And to pair with that, like human movement has changed over the last 70 years. Like we as a species move completely different than we did before modern shoes became commonplace, with elevated heels, tapered toe boxes, and arch support, due to modern surfaces that are hard, flat, and consistent, right? And you know, you go watch any old movie prior to the 1960s, and humans didn't run the way they run now. They ran better. Humans didn't move the way they move now. They even walk different, right? You know, so modern footwear has completely, and modern surfaces have completely changed the way humans move as a species, where for eons, humans moved a certain way and they no longer do. And Altra is about getting people back to that natural movement, back to that homeostasis, getting your foot in its natural position, and making all that stuff work the way it's supposed to work. And, you know, I always come back to this when I'm training podiatrists. I'm like, or any group of doctors, is like, in no other piece of medical can I think of anywhere where we take the body and say, oh, let's move that part of the body out of homeostasis, you know, out of its natural, happy, healthy state, and hope good things happen. Because that's just not what it is. Everything about doing responsible, ethical, great medicine is restoring the body back to its natural, happy, healthy state. And that's the thing that I hope lives on, like, is we're able, for people, even as the brand gets really big, to somehow understand that piece of Altra, is that this is about getting your body back into its natural, happy, healthy state and letting everything work the way that it's supposed to. And that's really difficult for a brand to do as it grows. It's the hardest thing to really keep, and it's not something a brand can really, as we have come to know, advertise or market, you know, due to bureaucracy and lawyers and legal things that happen, and just the realities of becoming a big global brand with the FTC and everything else, you know. So, but at the core, that's who we are. That's why we did this. Like, we wanted people to move better. We wanted them to run or walk with lower impact, better technique that was more natural for their body. We wanted their foot position to be in the position they were born in, and to restore their running health or their foot health back to, you know, a natural state, so that they're able to accomplish their goals and do the things that their body is capable of doing. Hence our old zero limits tagline. And I still really believe in that. And
Hashtag zero limits.
Hashtag zero limits, baby. And that's a great way to end it. Hashtag zero limits.
Yeah. Thanks, fellas. I appreciate it. Thanks for, like, this was fun. I think we could do a round 2 and we could talk about what's in a name, scary moments, lawsuits, like the whole development of a brand new shoe, right? Like connecting with China.
We didn't even mention a toaster oven today.
We did not talk about a toaster oven. We didn't talk about the band saws. We didn't, like, there's a lot more that we could get into. We could easily do around
Thanks, guys. Love you
thanks.
guys
This
too.
was a lot of fun, guys. I love you all. Appreciate it.
You
So
too.
again, a bit of curiosity here with Golden Harper, Brian Beckstead, and Joe Morton. This is your host,
Thanks,
Jamie
guys.
Howlett. Thanks for coming on today. Appreciate it.